We are in Sheviit, Perek Aleph, Mishnah Dalet. We're going to continue, the Mishnah, the first beginning is going to continue talking about the issue of when a person has a Sdei Ilan, a tree bearing, a tree field, and he wants to be able to plow in the entire field up until Shavuot before Shemitah. So we said that the condition of him plowing in the entire field is if he has at least 3 trees in the field, and the 3 trees can produce a kikar dveila, a fig cake that is a measurement that is shishi mana itaki. It's 60 Italian mana, which is about 24 kilograms according to the Kahati. So now the Mishnah is going to continue about these details about when is the measurement of the fruit trees, the fruit enough, and when is it not. It says the Mishnah. So let's say one of them, if I have these 3 trees in my beitzah, remember we said a beitzah is 50 by 50 amot. This could be square. Let's make it square to make it 50 by 50. That's close enough. Okay, I have these 3 trees, and so I didn't discuss this in an earlier Mishnah. We discussed is each tree have to produce a whole kikar tevela or all 3 together? Between you and me, if each tree has to produce a kikar tevela of 50 kilograms, it's a huge tree. So we went according to the opinion that that all trees together. So it's a third of the 60 mana itaki. So we're going to read it that way. If one of them had enough to make a third of the kikar tevela, u'shnayim ein osim, and 2 of them are not big enough, or shnayim osim ve'echad ein osim. What if 2 of them are the proper size, but one is not? Ein choshim el litzorkan. That negates the whole field, and you can only plow litzorkan, as we said, around each tree. Ad shiyu mishlosha ve'ad tisha. So the Bartenura is going to explain. Let's just translate until it's from 3 to 9, meaning kolomar din zeh she'amarnu, this rule that we said, hanu mishlosha ve'ad tisha. That's when you have 3 to 9 trees. The Mishnah continues. Okay, hayu asara, but if there are 10 trees in the beitzah, asara ulamala bein osim bein she'inam osim. When there are 10 or more trees in a field the size of the beitzah, whether they produce enough to produce that 60 mana, that 60 weight cake of figs, dveila, bein she'osim bein she'inam osim, whether they can do it or not. Choshim kol be'etzah b'shvilam. You can plow the entire beitzah before them. Shnei emar. Now that's the end of this discussion by now of Sdei Ilan. So what we learned until this point is 3 trees. If there's only 3 trees, then they have to produce 60 dveila. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 trees, they have to produce the dveila. Once you have 10 or more, then it doesn't matter how much they produce. If they're bad fruit producing, it doesn't matter. You can plow the entire field. Now the Mishnah is going to turn to, what do we know? How do we know there's this issue of Tosefet Sheviit? How do we know there's such a thing as that you can't plow? He says that this is what the Bartenura says. Arei Shakai. This is at the beginning of the Mishnah. This second part of the Mishnah is now referring to the beginning of the Mishnah of this chapter, Itnan, that we learned. Ein choshim le'eletzorkan. You cannot plow before Sheviit other than what is for the need of the trees themselves. I.e., we're talking about Iyar, or Sivan up to Shavuot. It's not Shemitah. Why in the world are we adding on time before Shemitah? How do we know this? Let's go back to our Mishnah. Shnei Amar, as it says. B'charish u'b'katzir tishbot. It says in the Torah, B'charish u'b'katzir tishbot. You should rest from your plowing and from your harvesting. En tzarich lomar charish v'katzir shel Sheviit. There's no need to say charish v'katzir of Sheviit, because we already know that one is prohibited from plowing and from harvesting on Sheviit. Ella charish shel erev Sheviit. Rather, the pasuk must be talking about the charish, the plowing of erev Sheviit. Shu nichnas b'Shviit. The erev Sheviit, the charish of the year before Sheviit, that's entering into Sheviit. The katzir shel Sheviit, shiyotzei the motzei Sheviit. It must be talking about you must rest from the harvest of Sheviit, from motzei Sheviit, from plants that are planted after Sheviit. What in the world is going on here? Where does this pasuk from? So the Mishnah doesn't tell you, it's actually a trick. This pasuk about charish u'bakatzir tishbot is actually not from the laws of Sheviit at all. I'll show you what it's from. Says the Torah. This is actually from Shemot Lamed Dalet Chav Aleph. And just to give you a context, this is right after Cheder Meraglim. Chet Egel, and God, after the Chet Egel, God forgives all the Jewish people, and he says, Moshe, forgiven. And then there's a whole list of mitzvot afterwards. Let me get for you the psukim just to show you where we're coming. Here we go. You might recognize this. Blah, blah, blah. This is what Moshe says after Chet Egel, we have a whole new covenant. Wonderful. Then there's a whole list, and God says, by the way, don't you dare tichrot brit lioshev haaretz, make covenants, pen yelem okesh, there'll be a stumbling block for you. And then we have all other mitzvot. We have a whole bunch of mitzvot. Chag hamatzot, tishmor pesach, peter rechem li. And then it says, and peter chamor tifteh b'seh. And then there's an interesting pasuk. Sheishet yamim ta'avod, uvayom, you should work for 6 days. Uvayom hashvi'i tishbot, on the 7th day you should rest. B'charish ubakatzir tishbot. Here we go. You should rest from your charish and your katzir. You should rest from your plowing, and from your harvesting. So the pasuk itself is talking about Shabbat. It is not talking about Sheviit. Let's go back to our Mishnah. Okay, the Mishnah says, how do we know? Okay, Shne'emar. How do we know that you have to have Tosefet Sheviit? Shne'emar b'charish uvakatzir tishbot, because it says charish uvakatzir tishbot. You should rest from charish uvakatzir. You think it's talking about Sheviit? No way. People who know the psukim say it's not. Let's read the Bar Tanura. From where do we learn that you can't plow the entire Beit Sa'af field if you have less than 3 trees or it doesn't produce the right amount? Shne'emar, as it says, b'charish uvekatzir tishbot. But what? Didn't we just learn that it's talking about Shabbat? Im eino inyan the Shabbat Breshit. But it can't be talking about Shabbat Breshit. Shekvar ne'emar, it says in the Torah, sheshit yamim ta'avod, v'asita kol melachtecha. It says 6 days you work, and on the 7th day, Yom HaShvi Tishbot. So everybody knows you can't plow or harvest on Shabbat. So therefore, it can't be talking about Shabbat. V'lo lishmita, and it also can't be talking about Shemitah. Why? Shekvar ne'emar, it already said, Sheish shanim tizva sadecha. V'sheish shanim tizmor karmecha. You're allowed to work 6 years. Okay? And right after that, let's go back to our psukim. Right? It says, Sheish shanim tizra, and then it says, at the 7th year, Sadcha lo tizra, v'karmecha lo tizmor. You're not allowed to do those things. We already know that you can't do those things. So therefore, it says the Bar Tanura, therefore it can't be relevant for Shemitah. So therefore, Tanehu inyan, this is what the Mishnah is saying. Use these words and learn them, le'esor shnei prakim shel erev shvi'it. That we're going to learn them to tell you that there are 2 periods of time from erev shvi'it. Pesach, the Sdei Lavan. We're going to learn this concept in a few Mishnah of Sdei Lavan. So Sdei Lavan is from Pesach. U'matzeret, the Sdei Ilan. And from Matzeret, the Sdei Ilan. Ve'hachi ka'amar Quran, this is what the Torah is telling you. Becharish shektiro asur, plowing whose harvesting is prohibited. Ve'ezez, and what is that? Charish al erev shvi'it shenichnas al shvi'it. Plowing of erev shvi'it before shvi'it, tishbot, you should rest. I.e., don't do plowing erev shvi'it when you're going to have to harvest on shvi'it. Ubakatzir, and a harvest, shecharisho asur, whose plowing was prohibited. Ve'ezez, and what is that? Katzir shel shvi'it. Shiyotzei lemotzei shvi'it, the katzir of the 7th year. The katzir of 7th year, that comes out on after the 7th year. Nami tishbot, you're not allowed to do that. Shesvichim shegalu b'shvi'it, plants that grew on shvi'it. Or she'avar b'zarah b'shvi'it, or if a person planted in shvi'it, asur v'kotzoram b'shmini. This is the notion of Tosefet Sheviit. This is the opinion of the Tanakama. The Tanakama says that we learn from this pasuk of Charishu B'Kasir Tishbot the idea of Tosefet Sheviit. Mina Torah, let's go back to our chart, that the Torah teaches you that Mina Torah, you have to add on time before and after the month of the time of Sheviit. All right, let's learn them finish the Mishnah. Rabbi Yishmael says, no, I don't learn it that way. This pasuk has nothing to do with Shemitah. It's about Shabbat. We learned it about Shabbat. It's about Shabbat. Ma'charish v'shut. There's no mitzvah that requires you to plow. No mitzvah in the world. Plowing is optional. Af katzir v'shut. It says charish v'katzir. So too, it only refers to optional harvesting. Yatzak katzir ha'omer. But that excludes Katzir HaOmer. There's a mitzvah of Katzir HaOmer during the holiday of Pesach, when they cut the Omer right after and they bring the Korban HaOmer on the 2nd day of Pesach. They have to cut it right after the Chag of Pesach. What if the 2nd day of Yom Tov is Shabbat? I live in Israel. Is Shabbat. Then Rabbi Yishmael says it's a mitzvah to cut on Shabbat to harvest the Katzir HaOmer on the night of the first night of Chol Hamoed Pesach if it turns out to be a Shabbat. But therefore, he says, I don't learn this has to do with adding any time at all to Shemitah. So where does he learn the time of Shemitah? He learns it from, it's not here. Okay, it's not here in the Bartanur. Where does he learn it from? The Gemara. This is actually the Gemara in Moed Katan. The Gemara says, okay, this is a quote from the Gemara in Moed Katan. They have a Braita that says, Rabbi Akiva Omer, this opinion is Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Shmuel argued and said, no, this idea of Tosefet is not from this pasuk. So Rabbi Akiva said I learned it from the pasuk. Rabbi Shmuel said it's not from the pasuk. And we actually paskin like Rabbi Shmuel. So where did you get the idea of Tosefet from? Rabbi Shmuel says it's a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Halacha l'Moshe Sinai, we learn out that you have 30 days, but only in the time of the Beit HaMikdash. That's the conclusion of the Gemara. That you have halacha l'Moshe Sinai, and it has nothing to do with learning it from the psukim of Becharishu, Bekatzir, Tishbot. We'll stop here if you have any comments or questions. I didn't learn this whole Gemara. I thought it was a little extra. We did enough. If you have any comments or questions or want me to explain it to you, rspolter@gmail.com. We'll dedicate the learning to the memory of my father, Harav Simcha ben Yitzchak Kalman. Have a great day.